My name is Oren. I'm from Dublin. We've got a nice intimate group, but a really interesting topic, I think. I've got Abby here beside me, and I'm going to throw her the first question, I think, of Abby, why are we here?
Great question, Oren. I thought the title of today's talk would, we had kind of thought of what might be an interesting title, might explain the situation, but also carefully worded not to cause any sort of eyebrows to raise too quickly. So I think it's no secret that part of our Kinfire experience being together is embracing the Irish culture and the Irish heritage of our country, and that's been present in our Frás Lé and you might have seen the trailer for Kinfire. So today we're just here to have a bit of a discussion about that and hear what you think and what our panelists think about this topic. And hopefully we'll all learn something new, maybe have some interesting discussion after this is over, and start the conversation going, really. So I'll pass this back over to Oren, who's going to kick us off with our question number one.
Awesome stuff. Thanks, Abby. Yeah, so maybe we'll just go through our panelists first of all. So if we could just kind of speed date through this, if you could tell us your name and where you're from. Cad an Díobh agus Carva Steve.
Okay. It's Misha Mary Teresa, and I'm from Limnock, a great county. You must have heard me screaming this morning for it. But yeah.
And you live in Dublin?
Oh yeah, I live in Dublin now.
I'm Cormac. I'm from Kerry, and I live in Dublin as well.
It's Mishi Samuel. I'm Samuel. I'm from a little town called Kilkeel in County Down, and I'm delighted to be here and have a real love for the Irish language and
Great.
the gospel.
Good Margaret, thank you. So we'll get into the meaty old questions. My first is, what does it mean to be Irish, and does Gaeilge, or the Irish language, play a part in that?
For me, what it means to be Irish is to never be able to take a compliment, to always be talking about the weather, and to just, for some reason, be very persistent. But for me, in relation to the Irish language, I went to an all-Irish primary school. My parents didn't speak Irish. It was really important to them that we learnt. Unfortunately, it meant we spent most of our dinners giving out about them, and they did not know. Because my brothers also learnt, and all three of us are fluent. I'm now a primary school teacher, so I speak it every single day. I use it to communicate with staff, so the younger children don't know what we're talking about. And even when we're socialising outside of school, we would speak Irish to each other. One of my housemates is walking towards me, and even in the house, we'd use a cúpla focal. It's something that is every day for me.
I'm here to represent normal people, so I did, where I'm from in Kerry, there's not a huge amount of Irish. Like, everybody knows Irish, but no one speaks it really. That's kind of and that's exactly where I'm at. I can probably, if I have a week, a good hour conversation, I can get up to conversational speed. I found it's depended on what I'm doing in my life. There's times in my life I've had a bit of time. I've been going along to conversation groups and get real passionate about the Irish language and potential for its use in advancing the gospel. And then there's other times I'm just busy. And so I was working in construction for 6 years, and I don't think I thought about the Irish language once. And then I'm just starting to think about what it means. For me, I think it's quite important to distinguish Irish culture from Irish language. So Irish culture is quite accessible, and just by the very fact it's a language, it can be a little bit accessible, and a lot of people have been taught it badly in schools. So there's a lot of negativity about Irish language by people who are actually pretty positive to Irish culture. So that's me. I'm the bad guy in the panel, I think. I'm very positive, but I'm a bit unsure of how it works in my life or in my church as a Christian.
Okay, and Sam, what's your relationship to Irish language and culture?
You've just called yourself the bad guy, and I feel bad. I'm British. I have 2 passports. I have dual citizenship. I consider myself both Irish and British. So I'm from the part of the island that is just in a whirlwind of trying to work out what it is. And so I suppose increasingly I have this shared mixed identity in my own personhood of being both British, loving the crown and all things British, but also increasingly becoming more and more Irish and loving that culture and its people and its language as well. And so I've been on a journey for about 10, 15 years now. We're trying to accept both and live in that space and celebrate both. And is that the question you want me to answer? Or did you want the... Okay.
Your kids?
Oh, do you want more of that?
Just tell me about that. So you don't speak Irish?
I don't speak Irish, but my children are fluent. So is this where I tell my story? Is this the bit? Okay, I'll tell my story. Okay.
Go for it.
So yes, you couldn't probably get more British than myself because right next door to my house is an Orange Hall, okay? And the Orange Hall is called the Chestnut Memorial Orange Hall. So my great-grandfather gave a piece of land to the Orange Order, and there's now a hall built in my family's name, okay? So that's the heritage and the culture where I've come from. But when we started our business, Edengate, 10 years ago this April past, one of the things that came to my mind was, well, if I'm going to do a Christian-based travel company around Ireland, I better read Irish history, because I'd never read Irish history. I was always taught British history from Irish history from a British point of view. So we learned all the kings and queens of England, and there was a little section on the Irish history where they were a problem for the British. So that was my understanding of the Irish question. And so I sat down and read Irish history, started with the children's book, read the whole way through it, and got to the end and felt really convicted and upset, because I'd never really understood Irish history from an Irish point of view, and felt convicted that my tribe didn't, now there's faults on both sides, but my tribe historically did not treat the Irish well at all. And I had to work through that, and through a long story short, we decided, I married an American girl, and we decided that we're going to step into that culture with the Lord's leading and see what the Lord does. So I sent my children to a Gaelic school, so they're fluent in Irish. They speak the language without an issue. They dream and they process in both languages. They're now moving into the stage, like you, where they talk behind my back and I haven't a clue what they're saying or what they're planning, but I am delighted that that's the space they're moving into. And I'm encouraging them to pray in Irish and to read the Bible in Irish and to sort of put that stuff on the agenda. Now, that's been a tough journey for us to walk as a family, because some within my family and the broader Protestant Orange evangelical community have actually told me that I'm a traitor to our culture and to our side. And so I've had to process that and say, no, I don't think I am. We have to move into that space. And what does it look like to have Christ named in both cultures, certainly in the north, where the language can be a stepping stone for the gospel? And our children in that direction has been an eventful thing.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's a really powerful story, and I think speaks to the connectedness of all of these things. So language, culture, history, even, generational stories that people would have heard growing up. And while we were preparing for this talk, we were kind of considering how, the history of Ireland has interacted with Christianity and Christian faith. And, obviously the Celtic Christianity was a big part of Irish history. And in fact, the song we often sing, a verse, Os Gaeilge, in our church, Be Thou My Vision, it was originally an Irish song. I think it's the oldest song in the Western canon that we still sing today. So it's a very historical, piece of music. And that just kind of brings to mind the question maybe the panelists can talk to a bit about how Irish language and culture has played a part in the church history and Christian faith in Ireland.
I think we love talking about the early Irish church, and it's great and it's beautiful history, and it's far enough back that we can kind of appreciate, we can use it, we can leave the bad stuff, and we can take the good stuff, and there's a lot of good stuff. But for me, like as evangelicals, the 19th century, like if you read some of the history, the amount of evangelism that happened through Irish, just to Catholic people in all kinds of parts of Ireland, it was just phenomenal amounts happened, good and a little bit of bad, but basically through independence and immigration and stuff that just disappeared. And I feel like most of us are pretty new to evangelicalism. Most Irish churches are fairly new, so we've kind of almost forgotten that history. And so I think, the Catholic Church didn't become this dominant force by accident. That's a reaction against evangelicalism. So I think it's important for us to realize that the reason to be Irish and to be nationalist and to be Catholic are these things which are a bit anti-gospel. It's not just a coincidence that that's happened. It's been intentionally formed by some fairly smart and powerful Catholic people 100 years ago. And so for us to come into that, I think we need to respect a lot of what's gone before, a lot of the evangelical missionaries in the 19th century, even though they did some stuff wrong. But they were very Protestant, and most of us don't really identify ourselves massively as that, and we kind of distance ourselves from that. We think we're a new thing, but I suppose I would like to see us think about that, think about we have those original roots, but we have more recent roots, and there was some amazing evangelism happening through the Irish language, reaching very unreached places in the, say, 1820 to 1950, that kind of time.
Sorry, I'm thinking about what you said, and earlier we were talking about, actually, I'm going to say dangerous words here, Protestant soup kitchens, and how we felt the need, like, I don't use the word Protestant to describe myself, but technically to all my friends and family, that is what I am, because I am not Catholic. So that is their understanding. And then often when I talk about my faith, one of the first jokes is about, oh, did they give you some soup when you walked in the church door? It's a big part of the culture. We all have a laugh about it. And as a primary school teacher, I'm in that culture quite a lot. And I just really felt, I was saying to Oren, like, I feel like, then we as Protestants or Christians or whatever it may be, as the church, I think we need to lead the change in that thinking. And the best way that we can lead the change in that thinking is by using the Irish language in even in a small way or in a productive way, and not to be hiding and running from what has happened, but using Irish language and maybe culture as something to close the gap, and facing head on and stepping into what has gone before and actually leading in a new way and going, hey guys, actually, do you know what it's really all about? It's all about Jesus. And let us tell you that in Irish, and let us show you that through Irish culture. So it's reclaiming it, and not just expecting them to come to us, but us, like the Samaritan woman at the well, like Jesus at the well this morning, we're talking about that, like us going to people into their spaces where they're speaking Irish, where they're practicing their culture, and being present and sharing the gospel there.
Do you have anything to say there, Sam? Anything else you'd like to add?
Yes, I think there needs to be the church has to take the lead. I believe God gives each nation the church it deserves and needs, and vice versa. So the church on this island has to own its past and its history, look at its current situation and lead. And part of that is coming to terms with the past. Like a date that just echoes in my mind is the 1831 Act of Parliament, where the British Crown made it legal for Irish people to speak Irish. Like if that happened today, what would we say? We would say that's entirely inappropriate and wrong. But that's what happened. It's part of our history. We have to come to terms with that and say, like I bumped into an Irish friend a while back who was who was annoyed when he was thinking of his culture moving back that he was speaking to me in English. And he says, most people in Ireland speak in English. And I'm annoyed about that because effectively the Act of Parliament in 1831 did its job very well. It barred the language speaking and it barred the culture. And I think that was wrong. The government shouldn't have done that, and it has impacted how people see themselves as Irish and the language on this island. But it's happened. It's in the past. It presents an opportunity for us as the church to step up, to step into that and say, okay, let's look to Christ and see what we can do with this. And just wait. So that's my contribution. And that's the reason why one of the motivations behind Kinfire, one of the motivations behind our business Edengate and behind the Irish Gospel Partnership is to move into that space. And that's one of the number of things we want to look at and why we're here today.
Great. Yeah, just a quick show of hands. Does anybody here speak Gaeilge? Love Suez. Ordsnair, yeah? Or a couple of words maybe. Yeah, some other people. Yeah, awesome stuff. I mean, like what little knowledge I have of the Irish language, it's very, very difficult to separate the idea of the supernatural from the language. Like earlier this morning when Rebecca was on stage, she introduced us to the term Diagwit, which, you know, if you're to ask anyone quickly, it's like, it's hello. But what does that actually break down into? It's God be with you. Also, Banach Deirt, when you're greeting someone, again, it's like another hello version. But actually, that's the blessing of God on you. There is no way of just saying hello in Irish. It's immediately connected to the idea of God. Saying like hopefully or you know, like tomorrow, I hope that it's not going to be raining. You might answer Lacuna of Day. What does that mean? But like, oh yeah, with the help of God. That's actually what it means. Now, if you look in a dictionary or like, you know, popular phrases or something, you'll see like hopefully or, you know, fingers crossed. But actually, if you break down those words, it all references our Father in heaven. I'm sure there's people in here that speak other languages besides English and Irish. So again, give us a hands up if you speak another language. Just one couple, there we go, yeah. So you guys will probably know that if we try directly translating from one language to another, there's going to be things that we're going to miss out on. There's going to be like nuances that don't exist in English. Like I remember I was traveling in the United States, right? And I'm going through security in the airport and they're like, what brings you to the United States? And I'm like, you know, I'm just here for the crack. I mean, bad answer, you know, like you do not say that in our Hiberno English. You know, there's things that we understand in Ireland that they will not receive it the same way in another culture. So yeah, there's all those specific things about the Irish language and about any language, but I think there's something in Ireland of maybe not availing of the tool of language within the church. So for our panelists again, do you think that it is important for the church and for Christians today to engage with the Irish language and culture?
So building on what you said, I think there's two kind of principles from biblical principles about why it would be good. So there's the God's glorified when His praises are spoken in a new language and new culture, and I think that's a pretty simple one, really. But then there's a separate kind of related question: is it going to be missionally effective? And I suppose this is where my kind of slight reservations about this are because, so I would say if I was in the north, if you're going to reach people from a Catholic background, 100%, it's going to be missionally effective. And in a lot of parts of Ireland where there's a lot of Irish spoken, it's going to be missionally effective. But there are pretty big areas of Ireland where Irish Catholic background, the Irish culture people aren't positive about the Irish language, and a church that, I know we're nowhere near this, but a church that they'd overemphasize Irish language becomes exclusionary to people who think I can't access that. That's for more highly educated, it's a social class kind of indicator. Now, obviously, that's changing a bit, and there's a Gael school near us in Cabra, which was the last place you'd expect there to be one. But there's a lot of people who are probably the hardest people to reach who are Irish but not Irish. So for me, I think that's for a local church to figure out, where are we? If there's a Gael school nearby, it's a pretty good indicator. So what is missionally effective? But also keeping that bigger thing of, it's good. It's going to glorify God for His praise to be spoken in Irish, as in another language. And actually, the other thing is, a lot of our churches are very international. And there's plenty more people who speak Romanian or whatever. And so for those people, I think it takes a bit of leadership to, if you are speaking Irish, it's to show why it is missionally effective to them and to bring them along, which I think just takes a bit of skill and communication and leadership.
Yeah, I think we're a long, long, long way from somebody getting up on a Sunday morning and giving a talk in Irish. But I think there is definitely more opportunities to be using Irish as a tool for evangelism. 1.7 million people in the last census claim to be Irish speakers. There are over 400 Gael schools across the island. I work in Ballymun. There's 2. So again, you wouldn't expect a place you wouldn't expect. But actually, what I'm looking around and what I'm seeing is there seems to be a shift, because the Irish identity for so long was wrapped up in the Catholic Church, and now people are looking around and they're going, right, where am I going to find it? And some people, they're finding it in the gym. Other people are finding it at the GAA club. And for others, it's the language. I live down the road from Canberra, and in Stoneybatter, every week in a different pub, there's a pop-up Gael Talks. And it's like all ages. And it's not a particular class of person, it's not a particular type of person. There's a hunger and there's a passion for the language, and people are seeking it out. And I genuinely, I come from the countryside technically, even though it's Limerick City, but and where I come from, GAA is the church. And I think as Christians, these are the spaces we need to be in, because this is where people are looking for community. And if we're part of that community, and then we're able to talk to them about an even greater community and point them to who God is and who Jesus is, then we need to be there. We need to be the connection to bring them from one to the other. I think, was part of that question about barriers, or am I jumping ahead of myself? Barriers?
Yeah, go ahead, please tell us. We had one of our questions, which you were segueing in, is what are these barriers that would prevent people from engaging in this? Yeah.
So thinking about that idea of evangelism, and you called it cultural intentionality one night at his house. I was very impressed. As somebody who converted, I ended up as a teenager in a lovely little church in Limerick, and to me, nothing had changed. And I was like, oh, this is really nice, and met some nice people and was learning about Jesus. But I was still in school, and I was still connected to the community, and my identity was there as well, and my identity was with my family. But as time passed and as I grew in my faith, I realized that actually I was in some ways rejecting aspects of my identity by being a Christian. And then I moved up to Dublin, and it was like, bam. There is this whole little bubble that Christians in Dublin love to live in. And there was a subculture that I suddenly had to learn. And there was things that I didn't really understand. And it became a barrier for me. And I suddenly felt very distant from what it meant to be Irish. And I actually remember struggling for a couple of years, going, at one point going, I don't know if I can do this anymore. I love being Irish. And I don't know if being a Christian and being Irish is something that I can do. And I had to find my own way and find my footing in that. And maybe this is just something I'll experience because I come from a culture background, and I'll experience because I'm a convert. Maybe some of you might relate to that out there. But I just think that, if I felt like I couldn't even speak Irish in my church or in my church friends, and I had to be embarrassed and ashamed and get called the rebel, we have a bit of an issue. And if I feel that it would be laughed at for me to even suggest that, we use a cúpla focal on a Sunday morning, or somebody prays in Irish, is such a big deal, how are non-believing Christians going to feel when they walk in through our doors, if they walk in through our doors? And, I know I'm talking about a particular percentage of the population, but, the good news is for everybody. And, I have a passion and a heart for people because they're my people at home. It's all my family I'm thinking of and how we can reach them. It's all my friends that I grew up with and how we can reach them, the people that I work with every day. And this is just one of those ways that we can connect. And we need to take down the barriers and let our cultures blend, I suppose.
Yeah, I think there is something about the Irish to the Irish language and then other people and their relationship to the Irish language, where we have a lot of hang-ups about just words and a means of communication. Like, I'm on Dublin Bus or I'm on the Luas or whatever, and they're talking about, An Coppel Dove, Black Horse, and they're just kind of rolling in and out of languages as what you would have if you're in another country. There's none of this... I think we put a lot of weight onto it. Like, what happened in the past is in the past, but I think we don't do ourselves any favours now. So it was actually really lovely to be in Kinfire, and I think it was last year when we had the trailer, and there was a Lag an Gaeilge, there was an Irish version, and for the first time in my experience, I was getting exposed to my Christian faith in a language that I've had a past history with, so it made me kind of perk up and listen to it in a different way.
So I hear that conversation, and as a fellow person who lives on this same island as you, we share this space. I'm convicted that you feel that way, and that I don't want you to feel that way. You shouldn't feel uncomfortable or an awkwardness talking about Jesus in the Irish tongue in a church context. And my heart is wondering, well, how did you get there? We don't want that to be the case. How do we, that's what I'm struggling with as somebody who shares this island with you and want to help with that. And I think part of it is acknowledging the past and dealing with it moving forward. And having this conversation is a start and moving in that direction. And I think the local church, it's all well and good for us as a festival organizer having this conversation, but where does the main action happen on this island? It is the local church, so it's the pastors that have to lead us in this, and we want to support the church as they do that.
I grew up, my parents became believers when I was quite young, so from a Catholic background, so I kind of grew up a bit in and out of Catholic and Irish culture, and the church I grew up in, Abbey grew up in as well. We didn't have any of this. I was always and I don't know if that was a leadership decision or everybody was first generation Christians, but we in those days in 90s in Kerry, you're either a cult or you're Protestant, and cult was a far better option. People are, that's you're delighted to be called a cult. But I think one of the key things, and it was just, I don't know how it happened. There was a guy, old traveller man called Christy. I don't know if you remember, and he had leg problems. He had some kind of strange disease in his leg. He used to come along, sit in the back in a chair in the aisle, pull over another chair, put up his leg, and play the bodhrán. And he was a phenomenal bodhrán player. But his hearing wasn't great. So there'd be people at the front playing the guitar, trying to sing a few hymns and stuff like this. And they had to adapt their music to Christy's playing because he couldn't hear and he didn't care. He was just enjoying the day out for a session, He got a lift there off someone and it was, and I think that's a really good example of, so for me growing up, it feels very Irish because your Christy's there playing the bodhrán, and for anybody who comes in. So this kind of accidental cultural marker is there. And I think it's the church leaders' jobs to recognize those and to value them. And, you don't put them up the front speaking, you don't, but to recognize that God brings people and they have unique gifts and abilities, and to see how you can empower them to do the work of ministry God has called them to. So that's, I think we don't do enough of that, and I think Irish language is really good, but I think music is an easier. I don't play music, so I think it seems easy, and it's a more immediate thing. And it's just, but there's lots of other ways. Like I've often felt, not to the same extent, but a similar kind of a feeling. And I think it's up to church leaders who are not from an Irish Catholic background to ask the people who are, what makes you feel awkward? And they'll tell you, and it's not that, it's not that difficult to adapt to the person who kind of represents the people you're trying to reach.
Yeah, that's a great point, and in fact answers another question I had for you. Just in light of that kind of, I guess, developing that idea, might direct this question to Sam, but what do you think are some of the concrete steps we can take towards overcoming these cultural barriers and integrating people into this space in a way that can fit all of these different perspectives and languages?
So this is blue sky thinking.
We're moving that direction.
Yeah. Well, here's what's on my plate. Okay, I'll tell you where things are going. From a Kinfire point of view, as a board and as an events team organizer, we want to acknowledge that Irish is one of a number of languages for all the people who are here. And we want to acknowledge that. And what we've been doing on the main stage and our marketing material, we are giving more than a nod, but an acknowledgement that this is historically where we come from, and Irish is important to our land. So that tone and that stuff will continue within the festival and moving in that direction. Number one. Number two, the word of God matters, and it's the most important thing. So there has been conversations with the Crossway publishers in the States. We've got good friends in that world, and they're prepared to accept Kinfire's attempt to produce more gospel literature in the Irish language, and so they're prepared to back us and allow us to pick any number of good gospel resources, and if we can get a team together, we will translate them and publish it. So they have sent books that they think would work, and there's a beautiful, Jesus, the story where every story whispers his name. You know that one? What's it called? The Jesus Storybook Bible. So there's a suggestion we could translate that into Irish. And there's a number of other, like a few John Piper resources, a few Tim Keller stuff they're saying, you tell us what you think would be good for the Irish culture and people, and we'll help you translate it and fund that. So they're prepared to set aside finance to help us do that. So that's something concrete. So that's Crossway. And I'm delighted to have that on the table, but I would love to find Northern Irish donors who would step into that, so we're not asking outside help, because it's our issue. We need our own people to step into that and back it. So that's on the horizon. Another personal dream is out of Kinfire. I would love to see, my children went to their first Gaeltacht on the West Coast, and they came back raving about it and loved it. What about a Bible Gaeltacht week or something? So that question's been asked. I think I found a school, and I think I found somebody who could allow us to have it on the West Coast, but I need to find a team that would perhaps help me execute that. And who backs that? It could be a Kinfire thing, that's a board decision. It could be, certainly my business, Edengate Travel, will step in there and oversee and manage the logistics of that. And I know we've got donors who would help subsidise that. So an Irish Gaeltacht Bible thing for children, and I think it should be intergenerational. So there are three concrete things that are on the plate, and let's pray into that. Let's ask the Lord for his help. And the fourth thing, there is a discussion about a retranslation of the scriptures in Irish, because there are some stuff that's available, but people wonder about the quality of it. So I'm willing to be led by the Irish speakers. If we need a new translation, we could step into that. Whether it's a study Bible version, whether it's a ESV, let's have that discussion. But there are people who are prepared to help us do that and put that on the table as well. So there's four things that are on the horizon that I'm certainly pressing into, and would invite others to come with us in that.
Mary T's in my church, so I'm going to exercise good church leadership and listen to her ideas and then approve them.
Smart. Ionta Carfad. You know what? I'm really encouraged by the children's storybook translation and the potentially a new translation of the Bible, because as I was reading about like 400 Gael skulls. Now imagine like how hungry teachers are for resources in Irish. They don't have a lot. And then imagine you're a teacher trying to teach religion. And so many of the staff in my school would much prefer to do a Bible story than teach one of the Alive O lessons or Grow in Love lessons. And it's often been said and often been encouraged from the front by our principal. She's like, as long as you're telling them something about God. So if that's a general attitude of teachers, well, maybe if we put something like that into their hands, like what could we do? And I remember in secondary school, we had to have a Bible as part of our religion class. So why not give them like an NLT or a message version where the Irish is like approachable and readable, because the reality is a lot of Irish people still feel there's not enough confidence and not enough self-esteem about where we're at with the language. I think a lot of it's in our head. I'm sure after a couple of pints, most people would be flying with their Irish, but I think it's just a little bit like if we went for something a little bit more modernised, a little bit simple, I think it's something then that could be used in schools realistically. Like as a sixth class teacher for a number of years, we often worked through a gospel in English. So if I was in a Gael school, working through a gospel in Irish is something that is tangible as well. Like we need to stay realistic with what we can do, but that would be, I would love to see that.
Hear me say this, I don't want to step into this space as a guy from the north, from my background, and say, here's what you should be doing. I want to come with a servant heart and say, what do you need? And if you tell me this is, as a group of people, we get together and we talk through this, let's make that happen. Like pick the curriculum you want. There's plenty of CEF, really good material.
Yeah.
There's also one, what's it called? It's a children's version of not the Alpha course, the other one. Christianity Explored, there's a children's version of that one. Tell us which one you think would serve in a school context. And I'm 100% confident we would find the donors and the backers to make that happen.
Some other things. I've actually been really encouraged. So one of the things we had hoped from this was that people would just start talking about this and see what other people are doing. And since yesterday, I've talked to about 10, 12 people. I found out like there's a church group and they're writing hymns in Irish. I found out that there's a church up in East Belfast that does an Irish service once a month. You know, I've been talking to people who are people who are passionate about the language and have thought about like translating the gospel into simple Irish and what that would look like. And I think there's so much more going on than we realise. And there's still that culture of shame around our language a little bit that just needs to the best thing I think we could do right now is if as churches, as local churches, if there is something like a pop-up Gaeltacht in our community to like just go and like be present and like use the cúpla focal that we have and not be worrying about it. Like obviously someday I would love to be able to go to church myself and be able to pray in Irish and not have to Google every second word. But that's on me. That's not a church thing. That's a language thing. But like culturally as well, like I might get into trouble for this, but like for me, like I remember in the first few weeks when I moved to the church plant with Cormac, like he made reference to the All-Ireland final and I was like, oh, that's so exciting. He's talking about hurling in this sermon. There might have been a joke further down the line about, this is the bit that might get me in trouble, about the black and tans and the Pharisees.
Whoops.
But like culturally contextual things being mentioned in the sermon, and just like things that like, we laugh about as Irish people and like are things that we like are so Irish, like, not being able to take a compliment, and all these kind of things, like just naturally coming through. But more than anything, like guys, I have such a heart for, all these people that I love who don't know Jesus. and are just really hungry and looking for that community elsewhere. And I just want us to be the kind of community where it's easy to walk in the door, that there's no barrier, that there's no excuse, no reason for them to not be there. Like, so it's my views.
Thanks, Marty. I'm very conscious. Most pastors of Irish churches aren't Irish. I don't know. I don't have any statistics there, but I would say a lot are, and a lot tend to. I would say the amount of, like, there's a reason I'm here, with my very, very broken Irish, and I think it was you kind of scraped me off the bottom of the barrel here as, but the reality, I think, so this isn't going to come from church leaders, I would say. Like, I'm convinced, and we'll try and do some things, but I would say if you're here, you probably care or really are against the Irish language, one of the two. But if you do care, stuff like that, going along to your pop-up Gaeltacht and bringing a few people from your church whose Irish maybe isn't as good as yours, and then you can talk a bit in Irish and the gospel comes up. Those are really small steps, but that's actually the front line. And that's where the opportunities are there. And so I think it's great to get church leaders on board, but I think this is the kind of thing that you just have to see what are your opportunities, and even if your church leaders aren't that keen on it, to just tell people the gospel. No one can argue with that. And I've found, I used to live in Mayo, and I used to go to Kirkle Chorá, which is like every Tuesday night or something in a local place, and talking Irish, and it was the most legalistic community I've ever experienced in my life. It makes any church look great, because if your grammar was wrong, you got corrected, and so it would be like 10 minutes of chat and 50 minutes of grammar correction from these retired old school teachers, and they were all up. It was my grammar they were correcting, and I went along to Pop Gaeltacht there around a few months back, and it was honestly a kind of a minorly life-changing experience, because it is a kind of a community of grace. Really, it's the expectation is that people aren't getting it right, and it's okay if they speak breaking into English and all. And that's, I think, when you find communities that are acting in a Christ-like way without the gospel, those are very, very much more ready for the gospel to be spoken in. So that's just been my experience. No one told me that there was loads of meeting in Stoneybatter down the road from me until Mary T last week. So I've been planning to go along. But I think if you are near a pop-up Gaeltacht, I would really say to go along and to speak. And it's, yeah. So basically, I suppose my blue sky thinking is, I would love it to be loads of Christians really thinking about their communities, thinking about who are the hardest people to reach. And if you speak Irish and those people speak Irish, that you're just taking those opportunities and you feel confident, and you don't have to think of how this integrates with your Christianity, because it's just a natural part of your Christianity coming out.
Thank you so much. And also on the topic of pop-up Gaeltacht, we actually have one organised here at Kinfire. So that'll be tomorrow at 11 o'clock. You can join us outside the Swift building. So looking forward to seeing some of you there, or all of you there. And I think now we actually have time to, actually, Oren, could you take over for a second?
Q&A.
Yeah, so we're just going to open up the floor, because there's been a lot of kind of like ideas and things exchanged and shared, and we'd be really curious to know what it is that you think, maybe comments, concerns, other questions, if you have any ideas about what could happen, or maybe there's things happening in your congregations and communities. We'd love to hear that. So good old Patter down there is going to be thrown around the mic. Yeah.
Is there somebody else? I'll go second. Jerry's come back from Ring, so his'll be all Oscuelga. I'm trusting it's all Oscuelga.
So I live in a border town. There wouldn't be a lot of Irish spoken in the town, but it would be quite a Republican town where it would be very much appreciated. But sometimes we would sing Be Thou My Vision, Oscuelga. I would do the first verse, Oscuelga. The first time I did it, we put the words up in Irish and there was dead silence. No one could read them. But we sang it and then went into English. But the last time actually I did it, you could hear the murmurings of the congregation. So I think those of us who have a passion for the language, who love the language and love the whole culture, if we start doing little things, I'm a worship leader, so I'm just thinking I should be doing my part too. I should be going back now after Kinfar and saying, Tá ara nua a gwyn, I've a new song. And then even just to say, Tá ara nua a gwyn, I have a new song. I think little things like that will help, you know. In the beginning, one of the instruments I would play would be a whistle, and the whistle was the poor instrument of the flute. But I persevered, I was determined we were going to do that whistle. And now it's you know, people will say to me now sometimes, why aren't you playing your whistle? Well, it's because I haven't got the breath for it anymore. But you know, it was small steps with those who are passionate about it. I understand there's a lot of people in our church that wouldn't have a clue of Irish, but little bits and pieces.
Yeah, and I think yesterday, like just being able to listen to the wonderful New Irish Arts bringing in the Irish music, again, it's not something I've heard in Christian circles, which is kind of weird because music is really what connects us so much more profoundly than words, as was said at yesterday's evening session. Yeah, any other questions or comments or things for our panelists?
Load of one Bihosa Mahula, Begmid Eg Kana Bihosa Mahula Anocht, the New Irish Arts. So we're singing Bihosa Mahula tonight. So anybody who knows it, they might actually appreciate you being up the front. So you're leading them, but they were practicing this afternoon. They're great. Jerry. Come on, guys.
No, it was wonderful to hear what Samuel said there. Pharaoh, Owen Dushkart, a man from the wee north. But while I'm there, I live a gombainte show. Conna sa Harlín go glushin gach duine going iad ag lauert in our dan go rocha shane. The question was asked in Acts chapter 2. How is it that we all hear of these wonderful things in our own native language? This was the work of the Holy Spirit, you know, a gentleman who knew how to reach the heart. And while the multitudes won't be reached through the Irish language in the south or the north or anywhere else, there are significant numbers of people for whom it is their heart's language. And the Holy Spirit's work is into the heart. And I suppose if we were to ask honestly ourselves, it's wonderful to hear that the church should lead, and it should. Not that every church in the country needs to have sermons now next month all in Irish. No, the congregation is not ready for that. But the church should lead because the Lord said, go into all the world, into all creation, and proclaim the good news. You know, and at the end, they'll be there from every tribe and people and language and nation, blood bought. The blood of the Lamb, and they'll all worship the Lord. And where will they be that'll speak the Irish unless, you know, those who know the gospel and the Lord go to them? I suppose the question could be asked in our generation, really, how is it that these people don't hear the word of the Lord and the gospel in their own heart language, you know? And we read missionary books about people going to underdeveloped countries and translating languages and preaching the gospel to them way off over there across an ocean somewhere thousands of miles away. And, you know, we have our own people here. I've just come back from a week in Rheingau Gonach. That's a very proud Gaeltacht. Our colleague here talked a little bit about statistics in the Irish language and so on. It's the only Gaeltacht with an increased number of daily speakers since the last census. And I can tell you, they're a proud people down there. And if some of those would hear anybody tell them that Christ died for me in a danga rochi shane, the churach she glunder ar agree, to have warmed our hearts.
It kind of reminds me of that Irish shanachal, the old Irish proverb, Tirgan Tanga, Tirgan Anam. It's a country without a language is a country without a soul. And indeed, hearing something in your native tongue kind of makes you perk up in a different way.
Coming from somewhat similar background to Samuel, I've found that doing little things seems to connect. I'm in a border county as well. 2 or 3 things I've done, and I'd love more practical tips to do small things. When we have like a carol service or some public outreach event, welcoming people to Fáilte Róg Go Léir, and then finishing off in Irish. At a nursing home carol service, getting a friend to do the Ar Nahar and see the residents join in with that. It's lovely. Making the Gospels available. There are Gospels already printed. You probably know those through Alan Armstrong, and Baptist Missions helped to get these Gospels available. And just, even though people aren't going to be reading those and using them in the same way, but just the token of it and having those there I found helpful. So I'd love, we're hoping to do Be There My Vision in Irish soon, and in our services as well. I'd love more just little practical tips and steps if anybody else has or the panel has. That's been great so far. Thank you.
Yeah, just to mention an idea that may be called intercultural worship. One of our ECM team up north, Noah Bartlett's involved in a group called Intercultural Ministries Ireland, and really it's got to do with giving voice to people who are new to this island and yet have come to see. Look, our churches, we're full of diversity, full of different cultures. So the heart language isn't just Irish, it's many different languages. And yet I've been involved in a group there who were thinking that through and were really impacted then by the wells in this land, by its heritage, by its history, by the soil, by this place, that there is a language here that is, I suppose it's, sorry, I'm waffling. Intercultural worship mightn't be singing the whole Be Thou My Vision, it'd just be singing the odd line in the different languages that are in your church. Do you know? So Holy Forever we sang on Pentecost Sunday in all the different languages, and a bit more than Irish. Do you know? And so it's just that idea of working it in. But there's something powerful about worshipping in little lines of Irish. It doesn't need to be whole hymns.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think it's about having to be fluent in the language, but there is some way in which it can be utilised within the church. Yeah, great, thank you. You have another question there?
Just a suggestion, as well as Be Thou My Vision, is a contemporary song by Brian Dirksen, You Surround Me, has a verse, Oskelga. Brian Dirksen.
We'll have to get all these tips together somewhere, Samuel.
I don't know, my mind's kind of going all over the place, so I'm going to try and be intelligible. I just feel really challenged, especially about Mary T's attitude and enthusiasm, and all of yours, but I just find it very encouraging, and I get kind of emotional thinking about it, to be honest. Like, it's, yeah, I don't know. But I think one thing that comes to my mind that I'm thinking myself is, I think I'm probably the largest percentage of, I'm in that group of the largest percentage of Irish people who did Irish in school, would say now, oh sure, look, I'd love to get it back. And realistically, I'm not actually doing a whole lot to do that. So that's me, and I feel very convicted about that. But I think one thing that I've just been thinking about over the last few minutes is that these tips are really good and great, but there needs to be a real authenticity to it as well, doesn't there? Because I had a brilliant conversation with an American pastor who's over in near my home in Sligo. And he just has such a graw for the Irish culture. And as soon as he came to Ireland, he sent all his kids to the Gael School. And we were having a really great chat one day where he said, like, why has no one gone into Connemara and no one gone into the Gaeltacht to try and plant there, you know? And he, you know, he's not from Ireland, and he has come over here and adopted this real graw for the Irish culture. And I just think we can't just join our local GAA clubs and learn Irish as like a strategy or a tool, because that doesn't win people over. It's not about that. It's about getting involved in the culture and doing it because you love them. because you love the culture. So that's just something that's on my mind.
Great, thank you, Andrew. Anybody else? Anything from our panelists? Final words?
Yes, I'm conscious of our time. Yes, we need to plant churches into that region. And that conversation is being had. So the organisation that birthed Kinfire is called the Irish Gospel Partnership, and we're finding out more about that tonight. But that conversation is being had at that level. How do we get churches in there? How do we find men to lead in there? It's a question mark over it, but we don't know, but we want to move in that direction. And I'd say to you guys, please get involved. If you have ideas or suggestions or tips or convictions, please come forward and speak to us. We can't do it on our own. We need to help each other to do it. It is a heart language. It's one of a number of heart languages. As Ireland becomes increasingly multi-diverse and cultural, Irish is one of a number, but it's our land's language, and we need to do something about that. So, yes, let's do this together, and ask and plead with the Lord to give us wisdom as we do that, especially as we try and do it in the north for the multiple challenges there. Can I close with trying to say 3 phrases and you guess what they are? Because these things are. After okay. Is few cre ost ara. Is few cre ostra. Is few cre ostra. Nobody know what that is? Oh. Christ is worthy of worship. Number 2, you coached me in this if I'm doing this wrong. Next one. Where is it? Togig me ma aglish. Togig me ma aglish. I will build my church. Got it. And the last one, I just think is beautiful. Ta iasa gehaling. Ta iasa gehaling. What's that mean? Jesus is beautiful. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could say that, or our Irish friends and brothers and sisters could say that from a heart where they love Jesus? That's what we're moving to, hopefully. Pray for us.
Thank you for sharing that, Sam. It's really powerful to hear you speak those Irish words. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Maybe we'll just close in prayer. And why not in Irish? Or Nyahar Turniav, Gavamij Buikas Lat. Is Kama Cain Kulera Trogin no Pay Tanga Le Remits, Asian Tulin Igoni. Gurmila Mahagat as an Desh Agus and Spas on Shaw a Kinfire, Con an Tover Shaw a Flag Hoskelta, Le Mass, Le Covrone, Agus Le Found Tishkana, Vahalesh Nailga Chur in Usaj Sanaglish. Spragmwid. Chun leanan de raig ag caint agus ag chórá bhí conasmar is féidir linn an suscéile scape agus de riocht a leathnú tríd an ghaeilge a chur I bhaim. Agus bannig an bia a ísamid inis. Iramid ar na rudí seo trí Isa Christ. Amen.